Well, I've got 2:30. I appreciate everyone joining us this afternoon. Today should be fairly quick, and it's going to be a situation where I give you just enough information to make you a little anxious and then sign off. And we're going to talk about the upcoming spring tests and then just a couple of reminders. With the tests, I did send out some information this morning, and that is all we know at this point. I know that we were told that we would have information about accommodations by the end of January, and yes, I am aware that January has ended, but we don't have the Aspire information. And for the sake of clarity, I'll refer to the three different tests as the ACT, the Work Keys, and Aspire. Work Keys and ACT being given to our high schoolers that meet the requirements, and then Aspire for our elementary and middle kids. With Aspire, many but not all of the accommodations that are available for PASS will be available for Aspire. The information you've been given even up to this point on the Aspire website with the web address here has the accessibility users guide. There is a description of the accommodations that were available in 2014. Again, remember that the information on the Aspire website at this point is information from 2014 and has not yet been updated for 2015. Yes, I have put additional information to expected by early February, and I realize that we are fast approaching the middle of February. So there is some information about that. The email I sent this morning also has some of the timelines that are coming into play. There are webinars that are being offered this week. I think there are 5 different ones about accommodations and the personal, I'm looking for the correct term, personal needs profiles that have to be created. There was a webinar this morning from 9 to 11, another one on the 10th, the 11th, the 12th, and the 13th. But it's one of the attachments that I sent out this morning for Aspire, along with other training sessions and testing dates. Please work closely with your school test coordinator to ensure that students' needs are met. And again, as soon as we get the exact accommodations that are allowable, we will be sending those out. But you can get a general idea if you go to the website. You can get a general idea of what accommodations were allowable on the Aspire last year. Work Keys was another email I sent out this morning with attachments. And the Work Keys accommodations look very similar to past accommodations, including oral admin and what Work Keys calls more than standard time for presentation. But one of the attachments I sent this morning does have those allowable accommodations for Work Keys. The State Department did a webinar last week for district folks to talk about how some upcoming changes for Enrich will be used to address the new tests this spring, the Aspire, ACT, Work Keys, and we've missed the window for NAEP. The information from the SDE indicates that we will need to address any differences in accommodations on the new tests on all IEPs. And yes, on all IEPs. Now, before you panic, there are going to be 3 ways to handle this. The first way that we're going to talk about is the way we're going to use for the majority of students. And and I don't mean to make this sound simple, because when you're dealing with 150 or more, 200, 300 IEPs, there's nothing simple about this. But one of the ways that Enrich will help us do this is once Enrich has put in another update, and they are expecting the update toward the end of this week or next week for districts, Enrich will have a notice that you can generate to parents that will clarify the accommodations. And this will be used for the majority of our students. And the notice will simply tell parents that their students will have the same or similar accommodations to what was listed on the IEP for PASS. The notice, because it will be generated in Enrich, becomes part of the student's IEP folder, and that's the documentation where parents were notified that although this is a different test, the accommodations will be similar. Again, for those allowed. So there will be a notice that Enrich can generate. It is not there yet, and I'll say that several more times. Or you could do an IEP amendment, a special review, with or without a meeting, to document the change to the IEP that way. Or if you have an annual review already scheduled prior to the testing, then you would handle it just through your typical annual review. So 3 different ways to handle this, but all students for whom Aspire, ACT, and Work Keys apply will need to have this addressed through their IEP in one of these 3 ways. So every student who will take Aspire, ACT, or Work Keys will need to have the accommodation section addressed in one of these particular ways. The first way that we're going to talk about is the notice to parents. Once Enrich updates, there will be an action that you can choose to provide a notice to parents that will clarify that the student will receive accommodations on the Aspire, the new spring test, that would be similar to what they were receiving on PASS and what's listed on the IEP. For IEPs that have PASS accommodations that are similar to those that we anticipate in Aspire, you'll only have to do the notice to parents. We are going to interpret this as a district as meaning any accommodation other than oral admin for PASS ELA. So right now, any accommodation that you've got listed for PASS, except for oral admin for ELA, we're going to assume that this would also be given for the Aspire. Again, Enrich will be making these updates over the next few weeks, and we'll let you know when they're ready to do. What this will involve is to click on Add Action, IEP Amendment Cover Page, and one of your choices for the reason for doing the IEP Amendment Cover Page will be Clarifying Addendum. You'll click that, and you'll have to type in what section is going to be amended, and we'll give you the stock phrase. It'll be something about state testing accommodations. And then you'll send that notice home using 2 different methods, email, regular mail. And that notice becomes part of the IEP file in Enrich. So again, don't start doing this now because the action is not in Enrich yet. We'll notify you when the update has occurred. But you will click Add Action, and we'll send all this out in a cheat sheet. Add Action, IEP Amendment Cover Page. Your reason for that will be a clarifying addendum. That'll be one of your drop-down choices. You do not go into the IEP details like you typically would for an amendment and click Amend. All you're going to do is to create a notice. That's it. And you're going to do that through the Add Action IEP Amendment Cover Page. Once you have created that notice and sent it home, you've fulfilled your obligations. And again, this is for any student who has accommodations that are similar to what we anticipate will be on Aspire, and then what we already know for WorkKeys and ACT. The only exception are your elementary middle kids who had oral admin for PASS. You are going to have to handle those through an actual IEP amendment and not just this notice to parents. And we'll come back to this in a minute. So your second way, and this is what you would use with students who have oral admin for PASS ELA. On the Programs tab, you're going to schedule a meeting. This is an IEP amendment special review with a meeting. Choose, when you schedule a meeting and go in and create your meeting notice, you're going to choose yes, there will be additional items discussed, and there will be a drop down that will say something like Spring 2015 testing accommodations, or something that references the Spring 2015 tests as an additional item to be discussed in your meeting. Then you'll go back to Add Action on your Program tab, IEP Amendment cover page, and you'll put that standard phrase, assessment participation, state assessment accommodations for your section that's amended, and then you'll go into details and click Amend at that point, because you're having an actual meeting, because you're going to change what's on the IEP. Because with Aspire, remember, we don't anticipate being able to have oral admin for ELA. So you would be changing that in the IEP and amending it. And again, I'll come back to this and summarize in a moment. The third option would be to have an actual annual review. And you would create a new meeting, create your meeting notices, and additional to be discussed would be the spring testing, and you would just follow your usual procedure for an annual review, because you're going to be addressing all of those items on the IEP for your annual review anyway. So to go back just a moment, the majority of your students, and again, this applies to any student who's going to take Aspire, ACT, or WorkKeys, anybody in those age ranges, the majority of your students, you're only going to generate this notice to parents once Enrich has rolled out the update. The notice to parents is simply going to say, even though your current IEP says PASS, we're changing to the new testing, Aspire or ACT or WorkKeys, but your child will receive the same accommodations as your IEP says for PASS. It already says all of that, so you would add IEP amendment cover page, click clarifying addendum, and it will print out everything you need, and that's all you will do other than sending it home. You don't actually amend the IEP. So for the majority of your students, it's going to be simply a matter of generating this notice and sending it home to parents. No meetings involved. If, however, your IEPs call for oral admin for PASS, ELA, then you're going to have to either amend with or without a meeting. In order to do that with a meeting, you're going to schedule a meeting from the Program tab. You're going to say, we've got additional items to be discussed, and you'll choose the appropriate drop-down for that. You will then go into, just like you would any other IEP amendment, the cover page, address the areas that will need to be amended, which would include the assessment participation, and then go into your meeting amendments. And actually amend the IEP. If you do this through agree to amend without a meeting, then you just follow your IEP amendment cover page and you're agree to amend. And let me check. We had a question about no student should have oral admin unless they are non-readers. They still can have oral admin for science or social studies on PASS. So if your IEP only has oral admin for science and social studies on PASS, you don't have to do anything. If your IEP has oral admin for reading for PASS, that's not allowed at all under Aspire, so you're going to have to amend the IEP. So oral admin for Science Social Studies pass will stand. You're not going to make any changes for your past Science and Social Studies. For the change you're going to make, right now, we know for Aspire, oral admin is not allowed, or we anticipate it will not be allowed for ELA. So you would have to amend the IEP. Not just reading portion, but reading and writing. My understanding, Jennifer, was that the reading and writing on Aspire was together. I may be wrong about that. I will check and find out and send a clarification out. As soon as Enrich has made these updates, we'll send you all of this information in a cheat sheet so that it will make more sense than just kind of listening to this. The other thing that we will make available as soon as the department does, the department did a webinar for district folks last Wednesday, and they're going to make available the recording of the webinar and the PowerPoint from the webinar that walks through the different ways to address this with IEPs. I don't know about oral admin for math for Aspire. The drop-dead date would be before the test is given, within a reasonable time of giving the test. Again, this is the meeting notice is how you're going to address the majority of your students. So I would anticipate that as soon as the Enrich update is made and we notify you, you can go ahead and start generating those notices. The pass you don't do anything with. Your pass accommodations stand as they're written in the IEP because your students are only taking the Science and Social Studies part. They're taking the Aspire ELA math. So pass you won't do anything with. The Aspire timelines, I'm looking, are April 28th through the 30th. Is the first time they're given. So there's a little more time than that. And okay, let's wait about any kind of accommodations until we get written information on the Aspire. Remember, that's elementary middle, the way I'm using the term. ACT and work keys are different, and I do know that according to the accommodations that were sent out for work keys, that oral admin is allowed for work keys. Oral admin for all tests on work keys and more than standard time. That's what they call their extended time for work keys. I don't have anything in writing about ACT, and we don't have anything in writing for Aspire. The information I sent out about Aspire, and there's a Q&A that goes with it, was sent out as of this morning. The date on it is 2/21/15. So we don't have anything in writing at this point. About what the accommodations are supposed to be. So 3.5 ways to handle the new test. One that you'll use for the majority of your students will be the notice to parents saying your student's going to get similar accommodations to what he had on PASS on the new test. The second would be a special review with or without a meeting. And there will be a way, if it's with a meeting, to click a drop-down for additional items to be discussed, and you'll indicate on your IEP amendment cover page that you're amending the assessment participation portion with the state assessment accommodations, and then you'll actually amend the IEP. The third way, or the third different way, would be through the your annual review. If you actually had an annual review already scheduled for a student, and you would do that as you would any change for the IEP. Again, these changes have not been made in Enrich yet, so if you go in tomorrow and click Add Action IEP Amendment, there is not going to be a drop-down that says something about clarifying amendment. It's not there. Please don't call us and say, I'm trying to send out the notices for Aspire or for the new testing, and I don't see the amendments. They're not there yet. We'll let you know as soon as we know. The department did not have a specific date for the updates yet. They're anticipating Enrich rolling them out toward the end of this week or the beginning of next week. But we'll let you know, and we'll send out written instructions with that. Just a couple of reminders. This is the time of the year where you really start hitting the stride with initial referrals for evaluation. And we're finding in several schools that there have been problems for one reason or another in processing initial referrals. We've had parent complaints, or as part of the CPR review process, the district coordinator has found that there are referrals that happened at the beginning of school that have not had evaluation planning meetings scheduled or held. This is a huge issue. We have a school right now where a parent has filed a state complaint because of a lack of timely processing of a referral and scheduling of an evaluation planning meeting and evaluation. Make sure you have a process in place that smoothly and quickly processes referrals, both from your RTI team and from parents, and that you can document the time that it takes to go from the referral to your evaluation planning meeting. If there's a delay between when the student was referred to the RTI process and when the RTI refers to special ed for evaluation, there's got to be documentation of the interventions that were attempted and the frequent progress monitoring that was done in between, and communication of this progress monitoring to the parents. It's got to be clear what you were doing in the meantime. If this is a parent referral that has not gone through the RTI process, you've got to run the RTI process at the same time as the evaluation process to gather that data that the eligibility team needs in order to determine whether the problems are due to lack of appropriate instruction or to a disability. You've got to train your gen ed teachers and administrators to listen for trigger words from parents. If you've got communication from parents to your gen ed teachers and the parent is using words like testing, IEP, special ed, evaluate, or disability, that needs to trigger an immediate referral process. It also needs to trigger a conversation with the parent about what it is with clarification, an immediate conversation with the parent. Those are very clear trigger words. Testing, IEP, evaluation, disability, those are clear trigger words from a parent. There are other words that are less clear. When a parent's asking for help or assistance or support, that still should trigger an immediate response, but it's more of a conversation with the parent about what's going on and how can we put some supports in place. Please do not get into a situation where we have a parent email from early in the school year or even in August that said where the parent is requesting testing and an evaluation planning meeting has just been scheduled 6 months later. There's no way at all to defend the time between that parent requesting testing and talking about I think my child may have a disability, and an evaluation planning meeting not being held until December or January. There's no way to defend that. There was a question about referrals needing to be in writing. There's got to be the reg requirement for that referral to be in writing is from a school personnel point of view and not necessarily from a parent. There's nothing in the regs that require the parent to put their request in writing. Now, what you can't, but here's what needs to happen. Yes, there's certain information that you will need in order to start the referral process. What we would want to see if we came on site is if we've got a parent complaining about the timeline and we're looking to investigate, and I've got an email from August, say, where the parent is emailing the gen ed teacher to say, I want my child tested. I think my child may have a disability. I want you to evaluate my child, or my child needs an IEP. We would expect immediate follow-up from someone at the school in authority, whether it's the special ed teacher, the special ed coordinator, an administrator who's knowledgeable in child find, somebody following up with that parent to try to clarify the issues and then to start that referral process. Now, here's what happens sometimes. The parent starts asking for testing. And so the school sends that packet of information to the parent. The school sends the developmental history, the parent referral, other things for the parent to fill out, and they don't hear anything else. You're going to need clear documentation that you are pursuing getting that information back quickly. And within a reasonable time frame, if you don't get it back from the parent, you need to, because you've already started gathering the information from your end, from the school's perspective, you need to pursue that referral packet and proceed with turning in that packet with your documentation of your attempts to get that from the parent. So when you turn in your referral packet to your district coordinator, Mary Ann gets it and she sees, oh, we sent the parent referral information 4 different times over the course of 2 weeks. We followed up with phone calls to the parents to see if they had any questions. We followed up with emails to the parent, still didn't get any response. So we will pursue getting that parent information as part of the eval process. You can't let the parent's lack of response hold up the referral process. So you would submit your packet with all of your documentation of your attempts in a timely fashion to try to get that information from the parent. And then as part of your evaluation planning meeting, let's say the parent didn't turn in the parent referral or the developmental history, you would add the developmental history and maybe parent interview to what you'll gather through the evaluation itself. So you'll turn in your timely referral packet and proceed with the evaluation process with your documentation, and all of that fulfills your child find obligations. That's what covers you. You've got no leg to stand on if the parent complains about how long the process takes. If you haven't turned in the referral packet and scheduled an evaluation planning meeting in a timely fashion, and that referral packet would include your documentation of your attempts to get the parent information. And also, during your evaluation planning meeting, you would request the information that hasn't been turned in by the parent as part of the evaluation. So timely fashion would be defined as the length of time that you could defend on the stand in a due process hearing. So if you're sitting on a due process stand and the due process hearing officer says, you say you completed this in a timely fashion, it took you 3 months. Why did it take you 3 months? Just saying, well, the parent wouldn't return the developmental history is not going to be enough. You've got to proceed with the referral. And so let's say we've got this situation. It's the parent that has requested the referral. the evaluation and the parent is insistent, and you've got the parent's email that's talked to the gen ed teacher about wanting testing. You send the parent the referral, the parent referral, developmental history, and all the other stuff for the parent, and at the same time you give the teacher referral. The teacher turns back in all of her information that doesn't indicate there are any problems. And you make your attempts over the next couple of weeks to get the parent information, and you get no response. You schedule your evaluation planning meeting. You have two choices. You can review this information, you turn it into your district coordinator and review it with her, and it may be that if the parent doesn't turn in any information that indicates there's a need to proceed with evaluation planning, you can refuse to evaluate on the basis that you have no reason to suspect a disability. That's a decision that's not made lightly, and it's one that's made in conjunction with your district coordinator, and a prior written notice would then come from the district. Or you can proceed on to your evaluation plan and invite the parent, and at that point, if the parent can't produce any more information about what her or his concerns are, then the team can determine that there is no need to gather additional information, and based on what you have, the student's not eligible. So, but that covers you. That fulfills your child find obligation. That proves that you have, based on the information that's been turned in, no reason to suspect this child has a disability, or based on the existing information you have, you've determined he does not have a disability. But you cannot let the parent's lack of response in this process interfere with fulfilling your child find obligations in a timely fashion. So again, this is the time when you start getting more and more initial evaluations. Just watch and I know a lot of you don't have any control over your school's RTI process. Just make sure that there is the school needs to make sure there's an RTI process in place that is monitoring progress in the RTI process, and then has a clear referral line to say, RTI is no longer meeting the student's needs. We are referring on for a special ed evaluation, and once that happens, that proceeds in a timely fashion. Some of you are having denial of FAPE meetings. These must be done through an IEP meeting. They cannot be done and agreed to amend without a meeting, because you're not really making changes to the IEP, amending the IEP. You're actually discussing the child's lack of service as the possible denial of FAPE, making a decision about whether or not there was a denial of FAPE and whether or not compensatory services are needed. Use the agenda that's on the bookshelf to walk you through, or one very similar to walk you through the process, and then upload that in Enrich so that you've got documentation for that IEP meeting. You've got to complete a compensatory services plan if the team determines there was a denial of FAPE. There's a sample one on the bookshelf. And then you're going to, once you have finished delivering the compensatory services, you've got to have another IEP meeting to discuss whether or not those compensatory services have closed that gap and done what they were supposed to. And that second IEP meeting can be done through a special review or an annual review. But again, it has to be done as a meeting, not an IEP agreed to amend without a meeting. At that second meeting, you are going to, if you're doing it through an IEP amendment, you're going to probably just update the present levels, because you'll have your progress monitoring data that you've been collecting, number one, through your IEP, but also through your compensatory services plan. So you would put that new information into the IEP, into present levels. It may not change the goals or anything else in the IEP, but there probably will be updated present levels. So those are denial of FAPE meetings. And you would hold those anytime you have not implemented an IEP the way it's written, anytime the school has failed to deliver accommodations or services as written in the IEP, or anytime you fail to provide the parent with appropriate prior written notice to implementing an IEP, any of those issues of noncompliance. And the team would discuss where the student would have been if he had received what he was supposed to have received and where he currently is, and then compensatory services would be owed if there was a gap between those two. And again, there are resources on the bookshelf to help with this. Next month's meeting, this morning had Kathy Canary come in to talk with us I guess there were about 15 people. And Kathy came and talked with the group about FIBAs, not the enriched process, but how and when you would conduct a functional behavior assessment. And Samantha just noted that it was awesome information. She did a great job. And then she wrapped up this morning by talking about how to deal with difficult parents in difficult situations. She is going to send me her information. We don't have the capacity to tape those presentations. They are voluntary in the mornings. We don't have the capacity to tape them, but we will certainly put all of her handouts and her presentation, the PowerPoint, on the web, on the bookshelf for people to use. Next month's morning topic will either be transition or it'll be organization, prioritization, and other survival skills. I'm waiting to hear back from Marietta Taylor at the Department of Ed as to whether she can come in March or April to talk to us about transition. So I will send out an email a week ahead of the 9th or so just to get a head count. It helps us know how many how many handouts to have available. And so I do appreciate those who responded to the email in a timely fashion to let us know that you were coming. It also helps us know whether we need the big training room or the smaller conference room for the group. So next month will either be transition or organization, prioritization, and other survival skills that are needed for special ed coordinators. And then our last morning topic in May will be how to work with outside service providers. And we'll have Marion Carter will kind of lead the discussion, but we'll have one of our special ed coordinators from one of our schools that does a great job with outside service providers, and then we'll have one of our actual outside service providers come. So you'll get the perspective from the school and from the outside service provider's perspective. Many of your outside service providers are not actually used to working in an educational setting, and so there's sometimes when they don't know what's required, or they are coming at it from a medical model, or you're in a position as a special ed coordinator in looking at their goals or their findings to have to work with them to be a little more specific, to provide better descriptive baseline or disability statements, because again they're coming from a medical model where some of that is not necessarily required. And then also talk about service delivery logs and documentation for outside service providers, so different things like that. So our next 3 morning topics would be transition, organization, prioritization, other survival skills for special ed coordinators, how to get set up, and then those will either be March or April. And then the last one in May will be the outside service provider. Again, don't go into Enrich tomorrow thinking that the changes for the testing, New Spring testing, are there. They are not. We will let you know as soon as they are, and we will send you out specific written directions on how to deal with this for each of the situations. We do anticipate that the majority of folks or students will be handled simply through the notice to parents. And right now we know that students who had oral admin for past ELA we'll have to have either a special review by amendment with or without a meeting, or an annual review to deal with those. And we'll let you know any other significant changes like that that would have to be handled through a special review or an annual review. Thank you all for attending, and we'll get the PowerPoint and recording up as quickly as we can. I'll hang around for about 5 minutes to see if anybody has any questions, and hope everybody has a great week.